Oh, I'm at like 2 watts per kilo.
You were at 2.
I think when I don't train, I go down to like 2 watts per kilo.
And now you're 4?
No, I think today I'm at like 3.8 or something,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. But I will be above 4.
Yeah.
4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, nice.
After my next ramp test, I'll hopefully be at 4.
The point is, it's very possible for you to recover a whole lot of fitness.
Well, the biggest thing is if you've been there before, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's much, 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 much easier to get to where you were before.
Seems to be.
Than to push to new limits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is consistency. Right, like that's like the yeah. I mean,
that's my first recommendation for anybody who's either new to training or returning to training after a long layoff is first lay that framework. So I'm verging into running after a long hiatus from that, and all I want to do is establish consistency. I'm just looking for 30-minute runs 5 days a week, and I'm working up to that over time. And that's just as an example. I don't care what those 30 minutes are comprised of. They're going to be, in my case, low intensity because I'm just trying to build durability and avoid injury. But the same idea applies across the board, regardless of which discipline or which sport. Is it's first get yourself out there however many times a week. Get on your trainer however many times a week. Once that's there, then you can start worrying about all the nuts and bolts, all the details. But if you don't have that consistency, you're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, you're starting to worry about things that you really don't have any business worrying about. And that's not to say you don't structure those workouts in the early stages, but if you can't even get yourself on the bike 3 times a week, why are you worrying about the composition of the workouts? So first get the framework in place and then move forward from there.
You see so many people, they get even worse. They can't do that, and then they're worried about which carbon fiber part to get. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
that's all of us.
Is it worth this 10 grams for $150?
Yeah.
Or should my VO2 max repeats be 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes? Should they be at 118% or 121%? I mean, all these things.
Yeah. And you can't train 3 times a week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you try, you think I'm going to do 3 times a week. You get on the bike 3 times a week. You beat yourself up all 3 of those times a week. Come the start of week 3, you have no desire to get on the bike again. Mm-hmm. So you dove in a little too headlong and Jonathan, back it off a bit.
How much... I'm just starting to get back into, after like October is hard for me to train, training momentum. Yeah. How motivational is it when you can string 1 or 2 or 3 weeks together?
Oh, it feels so good.
Without any
It's crucial. If you have a long-term plan and you can't establish momentum in the beginning, and this is basically what I'm talking about, is incrementally lifting that level of momentum.
Yeah.
But if you can't establish it early on, I mean, you're kind of doomed from the start.
I was sending like overly enthusiastic text messages to my friends while I was training because I was so excited about it, right? Earlier this week. Like it just feels so good. Yeah. But it's a really important thing that I like how you call it framework. It's very different than groundwork. It's more like a scheduling thing.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about like base conditioning or anything more specific than framework. I'm on the bike this day, and this day, at this time, and this time for this long, and this long.
Yeah, if you don't give yourself at least that, then it's going to be really tough to gain that momentum that you need to gain, because life you've gotten used to over the past 26 months. I believe you said you've gotten used to.
You have a whole different lifestyle, pattern of daily events.
Yeah.
So it's really, you do have to change your lifestyle around it.
There's this other part too where this happened yesterday to me. Life happened, and I wanted to do an hour recovery ride, but I only did a 30 minutes. And that happens to a lot of people that, like, I had a 90 workout minute scheduled. I can't do 90 today, so I'll just skip it. Yeah. No. Well, why don't you go down to the 45-minute version or even the 30-minute version, Chad, right?
Maintain that consistency, yeah.
It's like this this habit that you form. Yep. And even if you don't get the same training benefit, the habit is better.
Yes.
And I think there is still fitness benefit of doing a 45-minute session.
Absolutely.
Than a 90-minute one.
Yeah, I mean, turn it into a recovery session. And even that recovery session, as we'll talk about in a little while, has many benefits.
Yeah.
I think another aspect of this is having a goal.
Huge.
Yeah, like we've just talked about this, how 24 hours in the Old Pueblo is close enough. Like if it was just nationals for me, I can do that.
Well, there's 2 goals.
It's a long way out.
Watt per kilo goal, but also an event.
Yeah, I like having some sort of a performance benchmark day.
Yeah, you got to have something to strive toward.
Yep. If that's like, maybe it's just you say that by July, I want to set a certain time up a certain climb. Maybe that's just you want to go on that, a vacation that you'll have with your friends and you want to ride and you want to be fit.
It can be a body composition goal. I mean, totally. It could be, I want to get down to such and such percentage of body fat. I want to raise my lean mass to this. I mean, it doesn't have to be an event.
Yep.
Yeah, I like the event because it's a hard date that I can't change.
Yes.
Because it's easy to say, I want to do such and such by January 1st. And then you're like, well, it was a hard December, so let's do February 1st.
But so if it's not an event, then you have to make those 2 things measurable. You have to set a date, and you have to, of course, measure along the way.
And you can tell people, That's another telling, having your goal be public can, for some people, it depends on motivations, but for some people it can make them be more likely to follow it. Some people it's actually less. It's better if it's internal.
It's about accountability, but absolutely. It does affect different people different ways. Some people put that goal out there so that they can have that support and be on the line or be held responsible for it, accountable. And others, it just dissuades them.
Yeah. And I feel like that's super helpful for me. If I didn't have a goal, then I wouldn't have 3 weeks, or I wouldn't have the consistency that I've had for the past 3 to 4 weeks, for sure.
Probably why I haven't gotten on the bike yet.
We talked about it too, is you have multiple goals over multiple years.
Yep.
So if you just had 2 years from now, nationals, the motivation probably be different than in February. I'm going to go 24 hours in Old Pueblo, and then you're going to have some other races between.
And then I have Sea Otter, or I have the Soldier Hollow Pro XCT. That's another B race that I have, and then I have another B race. It's going to be Sea Otter, and then I have another B race, which is going to be the 35-mile version of Carson City Off Road. Not going to do the 50, and then thereafter, my A race is going to be nationals.
Yeah, right? So you're playing a much longer game than, for instance, I am. You're looking at something that's almost 2 full years out. I'm looking at something that I can drum up fitness 2 months out.
Yep.
I'm not going to be fast like you'll be, but I'll be able to carry my own.
Yeah. The other thing I see people do, and I think this is a legit, maybe not advised strategy, but you sign up for something that is way above your current capabilities. People do this, they sign up for an Ironman. And you go from I can't run a 5K, but I'm going to do an Ironman. And
goals have to be realistic.
But they do it a year ahead of time, and there gets this fear. It's you're motivated by fear, I'm going to die. And then they can do it, and they either quit or they do it. But I think that the people doing running, they sign up for a marathon when they can only do a 5K. And it's another kind of stretch goal. There's the distance goal, and then there's the time goal. And I think for beginner riders and for beginner people, just being able to ride 100 miles is a pretty that's a more tangible goal than to say, I want to be at 4 watts per kilo to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they can tell their friends, I rode 100 miles. I did an Ironman.
Yeah, and I have no problem with goals being lofty. I mean, they have to be achievable, even if over a long term it's going to require a high level of dedication. And you're like, it's not terribly realistic, but I'm pretty sure I can do that. I love that idea. And I think that 350 watt goal that Jonathan's shooting for is totally along those lines. If he falls short, so what? What if he reaches 330 or 335? I mean, that's a win.
If he doesn't reach it, I'm going to ask him every day, what's your FTP? Just kidding.
Right.
So I guess the one point that I really wanted to hit home on that I think is really important is, like you said, Nate, something is better than nothing. If you can't get in that scheduled workout, make sure you do that, because what you really need to do is build confidence in yourself as well as you're coming back into this, that you can indeed get back to this lifestyle and you can do it. Once you do that, I guess one thing especially that I've noticed is just when you're coming back, instead of worrying about, instead of putting so much pressure on yourself to just jam it and hit those numbers that you need to hit or go too hard, really pay attention to the simple things that make you the efficient and, I guess, healthy rider that you need to be. So, biomechanical efficiency. If you start off with one of the base plans, you'll have plenty of workouts that have workout techs and TrainerRoad that will be walking you through that. Whether it's pedaling drills, simple stuff just to keep you on track to make sure that things are functioning.
It's similar
properly.
to swimming in that respect, that if you hop in the pool and you start practicing bad habits from the start, they're only going to magnify. Oh, and it's going to be that much more difficult to reshape those habits later on. So if you can, from the start, pedal your bike well, then again, another win.
So what are some things people should look out for?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing that I just think of with this, first of all, is if he's been sitting at his desk and just doing that for that long, then chances are he's probably lost some mobility, I would assume.
Perhaps, or at least flexibility. He might, we've talked about how being behind a car, sitting at a desk, being in that seated position, that hip flex position actually kind of works on a bike rider, but that doesn't mean you want to perpetuate any of those imbalances that are already in place. So just because it doesn't bother you from the start, you may still consider improving your postural muscles, even if on the bike it's not that big a concern. It is a concern in other aspects of living.
So good amount of core work, and you can check that out by going to youtube.com/TrainerRoad. Sweet plug. For 5 exercises that you do that you recommend just can help a cyclist.
Yeah, sure, for flexibility. And then strength too. And I'm a big, as you if you've listened to the podcast, well know I'm a big proponent of strength training regardless of the type of athlete you are. But in this case, especially if you're coming from a period of dormancy, I think strength work from the start is the right way to go. I mean, build that strong body so that you can ride that bike well, so that you can position yourself well on the saddle, that you can apply force without, having all these different losses along the chain, that sort of thing.
And I think what you were getting to, Nate, is like a lot of people just don't know, number one, if they're bound for some sort of overuse injury because of an imbalance, or if they, until what point do I do core work? That sort of stuff. Like what signs they should look for.
Yeah, exactly. What signs should I look for on the bike that maybe something's wrong?
Yeah, a couple easy gets are knee movement. So which really boils down to a lack of hip control. And that's an easy get. And just watch your knees. I mean, are they ducking in toward the top tube at the top of every pedal stroke? Are they wavering? Period.
So in and out knee movement.
Yeah, lateral movement, side to side. Yep, exactly.
I actually told one of my PTs at one point that I felt like my hips were totally out of control, and he looked at me very weird. And then I think he was thinking like the Shakira side of things.
You just can't help walking around the office.
Exactly.
They're going crazy.
Right. Yeah. But they totally were on the bike, and I feel like that contributed a lot to things that, and basically it was try as I might, and it's really frustrating. Like try as you might to stabilize things and to make certain muscles work. I simply couldn't because I had gotten so out of the habit.
All that stabilization comes from the hips and the inner and outer thigh. I mean, not necessarily the muscles you think are responsible for dictating the knee's path.
So if your knees are slicing out, what should you do?
Again, address the hips. So typically it's a matter of external rotation in the hips, and then a lot of the time the adductors are particularly overstressed or overutilized. ITs can be tight. I mean, there's a lot of things that can cause issues, but some simple exercises for just strengthening the muscles in the outer hip are just anything that moves the leg laterally. So like side laying leg raises, clamshells, sidestepping with a band or some form of resistance around your legs, even attaching a cable to your leg and externally rotating and then moving the leg away from your midline sort of thing.
I'm going to put some photos up into the forum on this episode post. I'll have producer Ian take some photos while I do some of these movements that I've been doing to help with that.
Yeah, he's got some PT specific ones that are super specific to his issue, but also general to what we're lacking as people who move in a very particular plane and involve very specific muscles.
Yeah, and some really helpful ones like ways on the lateral movement with your legs like that. There are ways that you can do it with bands in the same exact spot without having to do have a bunch of lateral space to be able to do side steps. So I'll put in some different things that I've done there that have helped, because I think a lot of people, you talk about dormant glutes and the stability issues, and your glutes
are a big hip stabilizer.
That's exactly right. Like they aren't necessarily they aren't the muscles that are really pushing the pedals over.
No, they're big, strong muscles, and they're capable of doing quite a lot of work. But when we pedal a bike, they're not all that active in the propulsion sense.
Yeah, exactly. And when those become inactive, a lot of the time our quadriceps end up going, "Oh, don't worry, I can take the work." You know what I mean? And they get a little over eager there, and they might start pulling on things differently and cause some issues there. So it's an important way to keep it in check.
Runners too, the same issue because they're always going forward. The opposite sport that I think has the great lateral movement is basketball
or soccer
or anything.
soccer.
Yeah, so much side to side movement.
Football.
Also,
Tennis.
in the gym, at least I've noticed in America, there are two machines that you can do this where you put your legs in and you can go out or in.
Yeah.
You normally see women do them, and it's kind of considered as like a leg like
a vanity exercise.
Exactly,
thing?
but it's not.
It's functional.
Exactly. So sometimes it can be hard to get like the bands and stuff. Some people have bands at home, but if not, you go to a gym and there's those machines, I would put that into
not nothing.
It's maybe better than nothing, but barely. Yeah,
you don't think it's worth it?
No, from a seated position, I don't think it's a very practical exercise. It's not really the stabilization and the balance that comes with standing and doing these exercises, or even just floating your leg and laying on the ground, laying sideways, is a whole lot different.
Okay.
I mean, it's a little too specific, a little too isolating.
Yeah.
Isolative, is that a word?
I'll throw in a link to the bands that I got off of Amazon. They're super cheap too, which is nice, and you can travel with
easy
them.
Get.
Like $4, right?
Oh yeah,
Super cheap.
yeah, and you can travel with them, and it comes with a
Really
whole selection.
Thin ones that you can wrap up. I mean, they take up no space, so there's some pretty easily attainable tools, cheap ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I guess
and then rocking hips. We talked about this
thing
too. That people think when they rock their hips, it's simply a matter of their saddle being too high and they're having to reach the feet. But often enough, it can be a manifestation of a muscular imbalance. So maybe you have tight hamstrings just on the left side. So every time your left leg drops, you rock because that leg is reaching, or it just simply doesn't have the same level of flexibility. That single issue can manifest entirely across your body. It can carry all the way up. It basically just zigzag across the body and affects everything along the way. So little gets like that, the earlier you catch them and the earlier you can correct them and train those proper movement patterns and limit those inflexibilities, the better.
So how do you know, and like if it's not a saddle fit issue, how do you know like how to fix these things?
See a PT. I mean, these are things that we can say. I mean, we can give advice on what to do beyond the diagnosis, but the diagnosis itself needs to be done by people who are far more qualified than us.
Yeah. I think that's the best advice there.
And
Any photos?
Sports PT, rather, because there's different types of PTs,
ideally,
right?
if you have access to one,
Yeah, one that has experience working with cyclists is the best,
Endurance
obviously.
athletes,
because I remember I went to one PT and I was telling him that my knee hurt, and he worked with football players a lot at the college here, and I told him that when he's giving me problems, I was like, do you think I should hold off on the bike? He's like, no, man, I prescribe bike workouts for all of my guys that are coming back from knee surgery. But the problem was
low impact, no
I had done too much of that, right? And that's where a lot of the pain was going. So even though he thought it was low impact, it wasn't what I should be doing. Yeah. So it's really important to get the right one. And any exercises or anything else that we're putting up there, keep a massive grain of salt handy. They're ones that have worked for me, and they're alternatives to do things that can be a little bit easier, maybe if you're traveling or limited on space, that sort of stuff.
I'm going to say something controversial.
Ooh, okay.
Growing up, and I think with I'll just say growing up too, not all doctors and physicians are created equal. Got a scary story, but my wife would be paralyzed if we listened to one doctor rather than another doctor. You hear stories like that all the time. So if you don't like how you're being treated, that doctor is not like God.
It's not the be-all, end-all resource.
Get a second opinion. Yep. Yeah. And
they're woefully educated on certain matters. I mean, and it's no fault of their own. And then they get thrust into a lifestyle or a job that's so demanding that furthering their education becomes a really difficult thing to do.
It's just like anything. There are very, very smart, great doctors for some things and great doctors for another thing. That's kind of what your point is. And even in in an area of specialty, not all doctors are exactly the same. Sure. So just don't think that this one doctor did this. And there's probably some people maybe cringing at this, but you doctors, you look at your colleagues, you're not all equal. There are better ones. It's just like anything. Coaching, not all coaches are created equal. A doctor, there's a whole bunch more stuff to go through, but on average, it's much, much better, the quality. But just same with PTs. That's my point, is for PTs and for sicknesses, if you don't like it, why not get a second opinion?
Get a third,
It costs some money, and if they're all saying the same thing, that's probably what it is, but oftentimes you could get different stuff.
Totally. I think the last thing that I would add to this one is just make sure that you're comfortable pedaling at different cadences, like a whole wide range. There will be cadence drills in the workouts that you do.
That's an easy get to approach or to address early on.
And I feel like it's just going to be helpful because you'll find yourself out on the road eventually or on the trail, and you'll find yourself having to pedal at 40 RPM or having to pedal at 120. You just want to make sure that you're familiar with it all.
Alex, so you should look forward to this, because when you come back from a big time off like this, the gains are so quick that you feel like it's super motivating.
It's beginner gains all over again.
Yeah, exactly.
Young too, what, 26?
Yeah, you're going to come through these, every ramp test you do, you're going to come up so much. And even in the middle of a plan, especially that first plan, you might want to start bumping up your FTP or increasing intensity, because you're going to recover so quickly and come up so fast.
Probably.
As long as you don't overdo it. And then also, Chad, people shouldn't experience any pain when they're cycling, right?
There's really never a good excuse for that. I mean, maybe at the end of a ride or something, you got some low back pain or something. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about anything that's acute or noticeable.
You jump on the bike and your knee starts hurting.
Yeah.
You don't want to just push through it.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yep. If you like that video, you should subscribe to our channel. There's more where that came from. And even like the video down below with a thumbs up or leave us a comment.
If you want to see race analysis videos, click right over here. And if you want to get your coaching questions answered, click over here.
And if you want to become a faster cyclist, head over to TrainerRoad.com. It works. Trust us.
Just trust us.
We guarantee it.
Oh, yeah. Or your money back.
It's true. Take us up on it.